me a moment here to get hooked up. As he said, I've been in the payments industry for about 25 years, and I've seen a lot of changes. I had the good fortune of creating a company. Ben mentioned it earlier, Apriva. I was the founder of Apriva and worked there as the president for many years. And I learned everything I know about the payments industry and about information security through the experiences that I gained at Apriva. Because Apriva is a company that serves so much of the payments industry, I had the good fortune of being able to acquire a lot of knowledge as part of that experience. We were kind of controlling the watering hole, if you will, that everybody came to practice the craft of mobile payments. The work that I was fortunate enough to do with the U.S. government helped me to practice the craft of security. And of course, payments is the intersection of those two. So I learned a lot in this process. The challenge that I had at Apriva and the challenge that I tried to solve was, how do you grow a business that already has such a dominant market share in the two industries that it serves? And as part of that experience, I went around the world to try and figure out if Apriva could be used in other places. You know, we got the United States conquered, let's go and find out where else we can use this fantastic technology. And I learned something that, from my myopic perspective of a gringo living in the United States, where everything is convenient and at the touch of a button you can do anything you want, I learned something that kind of surprised me. I'm embarrassed to say that, because when I look back on it now, it seems so simple. And what I learned is that there's only one place in the world that really does business like the United States, and that's the United States. The rest of the world operates in an entirely different model. And you know, I would listen to, I served banks, I was working with the card industries, you know, and I would listen to their quarterly analyst reports, and they'd talk about market share. You know, Visa has dominant market share, MasterCard is doing these things in these different countries. And I thought, you know, wow, this is really impressive. These guys have got it under control. But then I realized, oh no, they're only serving a small piece of the world. And the larger piece of the world, about 70, maybe 80% of the world, doesn't even know who Visa and MasterCard is. Yet they're switched on, they're online, they're moving forward into the digital economy and all of this, but they're doing it in an entirely different way. I left Apriva about two and a half years ago, and decided to pursue the rest of the world, the larger piece of the market, and that's what I'm doing with Unipagos. So let's talk a little bit about Rails. Rails is a term that we in the payment industry use. It's really just it's one word, but it means a lot. It means the legal, the economic, and the technology framework that we use to conduct electronic payments. And in the US, these rails have names: Visa, MasterCard, Discover, American Express. And it's easy to imagine here in the US that everywhere we go, whatever we want, these rails are going to bring it to us on these kind of imaginary trains that have these colorful logos that we all know. And it's quick and easy and convenient, and it's very cost effective. This is America, it's the model for the rest of the world, right? It's not right. Actually, the reality is that there's 196 nation states on this planet, and America is one of 34 developed countries. And these countries have the rails that we know, but the other 162 countries don't. Their economies are informal, they're cash-based. The vast majority of them don't have bank accounts. America is the exception. It's not the rule around the world. And so these rails that we're familiar with really are not available, and it's not, in many cases, realistic for other countries to use those kinds of rails. So let's look at Mexico. It's our nearest neighbor, and it's a good example. 75% of the population is unbanked. There's not many terminals in the country, about 8 per thousand. Compare that to 40 per thousand in the United States. And most of the small businesses, 64% of them are mom and pop stores that they can't afford a payment terminal. And frankly, it wouldn't make sense to use a payment terminal because their customers don't have bank accounts or cards. So why would you do something like that? It doesn't make sense. We think about terminalizing a country in the sense of a payment terminal, and that seems like the answer, right? You just give all the merchants terminals. Well, if the the consumers don't have bank accounts and cards, why would you give them a terminal? To sit on the desk and hold down the paper? That doesn't make sense. So these guys have a problem. How do you participate in the digital economy? Here's another example. There's, like most countries, the government has social programs, and they need to remit services in the form of payments to their population. There's about 12.5 million participants in the social programs in Mexico. But because there isn't a digital infrastructure, they literally have to ship truckloads of cash all around the country every month to these people. Can you imagine the logistics of giving cash to 12.5 million people in a country as large as the country of Mexico? To further complicate the situation, they only have 250 field offices for that entire country, and that's about 70,000 people per office. Once a month, these people have to travel sometimes extraordinarily long distances just to get to that office, just to get their monthly remittance payments. That could be a full day's effort. The cost of this remittance, by the way, is about $10 per $150, which means that the load, the overhead, is 6.7%, which is extraordinary. You think about cash as being inexpensive, right? There's no interchange, there's no discount rates or anything like that. But when you use it in applications like this, the cost is actually much greater for handling cash than it would be to handle something electronic. They have needs. Here's another one. You know, we talk about paying online. These people pay in line. They get into lines to pay their electric bill, their gas bill, their telephone bill. They don't just go online and click a button or use auto pay. Every month they have to go and stand in a line. And that, again, takes a day. It's a modern economy in most respects. They have a lot of infrastructure, telecom and roads and things like that, but they don't have the rails for payment. So the conveniences that we rely on and take for granted, they don't have it. So let's talk about my company, Unipagos. This is an example of a new breed of company that has both an economic mission to make a profit and also a social mission. We recognize that most of the people on this planet don't have the ability to enjoy the benefits of a digital economy, and we have a clear vision of how that should change for the future of Mexico and all developing countries. And so our vision is this. It's simply to give all people equal access to those financial services that they need to be able to sustain and grow their lives and their businesses. We also understand our role in this future. It's very clear to us that what we need to provide is the legal, economic, and technology rails, there's that word, that permit a society to transition from a cash-based society, an informal economy, to a formal, modern, cashless economy. So, this is a thought experiment I love to do. Just open your mind for a moment. Imagine that electronic payments doesn't exist at all. Everybody in the United States has been using paper, currency, and checks to make payments. Imagine that that's the world we live in today. In all other respects, it's today. I'm not asking you to wind back 40 years. I'm saying now, today, but just it never happened. We never had this digital electronic payment revolution. And we all sit down today and we say, hey, I have a great idea. Let's change the world. Let's do electronic payments. Let's do this all electronically. Would we say, here's how we do it. We're going to give cards to everybody, and we're going to give terminals to all the merchants, and we're going to create this security standard called PCI, and we're going to make this other standard for cryptography called EMV, and this is what we're going to do. Is that what we would actually do? Does that make sense to you, given everything that we've got? No, that doesn't make sense. But that's, and of course it's a hypothetical in the United States. That's already done. We've done what we did. But outside of the United States, in these developing countries, it's not a hypothetical. This is the thing that they're going through right now. They're saying, do we do it like the US and follow that pattern and terminalize and cardize everybody? Or do we follow a different path? And just like the thought experiment that you just did, you can kind of simply and instinctively say, no, terminalizing and cardizing everybody doesn't make sense. There's got to be a different way. Everybody has mobile phones. In Mexico, 52% of the population has a smartphone, an Android phone in most cases. That's an infrastructure that we can take advantage of. So let's talk about what Rails means. This is what we've done in Mexico. First of all, the legal framework. The legal framework is based on a not-for-profit corporation. In different countries, the laws can sometimes be different, but in Mexico, it makes sense to create a not-for-profit company, to create a board of governors that's designed with insiders and outsiders that represent the public, and they have a responsibility to support the public good. This isn't our money that's in the system. This is the public's money, and so you have to be responsible with that money. And for that reason, you have to create the legal structures that are guaranteed to protect the public's money. In addition, because this is things that are actually going into bank accounts, there could be profits in the form of interest that are generated, and again, that interest isn't our money either. That has to go back to the public too. It has to serve the public good. And so an element of that legal structure is to provide social investment in the form of charitable giving, which is the way the profits are redistributed. We chose to do that because if you think about it, if you gave income in the form of a few pesos to 120 million people, that's a lot of 1099s that you'd have to generate, right? That wouldn't make a lot of sense. So rather than do that, we want to give that money back to the community that we serve. Around that legal framework, there is an economic framework. That economic framework is what hooks us into the formal economy. We work in that framework with the government in the form of the CNBV, which is the bank regulators, Profeco, which is the Mexican equivalent of the Consumer Protection Agency, to assure that the right legal contracts and the right economic relationships are established. We also work with the government programs like Prospero, which would be like our WIC program in the United States for women, infant, and children, and also 70 IMAS, which is like our Social Security program. We also work with non-governmental entities. UNTAD is the equivalent of the National Retail Federation of Mexico. Their membership is the 105 largest retailers in Mexico. They work with us to help establish relationships with the large retailers. And then on the smaller end, a company called Kiva is social charitable giving. If you're familiar with Kiva, you know that they focus on developing countries. We're a trustee of Kiva, and we provide the rails that allow that kind of charitable lending to make it into Mexico. Now, around all that, of course, is technology. This all operates in the cloud, so it's accessible by anything. It is built around a public key infrastructure that we implement ourselves. Now, if you were in the training session on Monday about cryptocurrencies, you understand that PKI is critical, and in particular it's critical for non-repudiation, which is the backbone of the way that all payment systems ultimately have to work in a digital world. We integrate with SPE, which is, I won't even try to pronounce it in Spanish, but this is the EFT network in Mexico. It's very fast, very efficient. And of course, around that is the mobile platform, which is what people are holding in their hands. And you get the sense that this is a really complicated thing to put all of this stuff together. But it has to be simple. A robust payment system on the back end, but on the front, the user experience has to be absolutely ridiculously simple. An example is just the enrollment process. We used the model of WhatsApp to allow you to be able to download the application, register your phone number, get a confirmation SMS, and then be able to create your own PIN in about 30 seconds. You have a bank account, you're online, you can start doing business. You are now in 30 seconds part of the electronic economy. Equally simple has to be the process of getting money in. Remember that these guys are using cash, so you have to be able to deposit cash at institutions that are authorized to be able to accept cash, which generally speaking means banks. Banks and ATMs. You need to be able to go to banks and ATMs to do this. We're partnered with the largest bank in Mexico, Bancomer, to provide that service. Using the application has to be simple as well. Just the idea of being able to send money from one end of the country to another is a formidable problem for Mexicans. So from your mobile phone now, you can do domestic money remittance. And then also, remember the inline example, bill payments? You receive your bills monthly via postal mail. They usually have a barcode on them. You can just scan the barcode and pay from your account. So now all of that time you spent online, in line, you can do in a few seconds online, and you can stay home, which is fantastic for Mexicans. Now, how does this actually work in practice? One of the It works in every industry. This is a payment system. It's designed to be a replacement for card-based networks. It's designed to be a replacement for cash. It provides real-time money remittance, the bill remittance, top-ups, utilities, services, government payments even are part of the system. But in addition, it has to do the same things that you would expect in a card-based system. So it has to integrate with retail point of sale, convenience stores, and those kinds of things. I mentioned we're partnered with UNTAD, which is the largest association of retailers in Mexico. We're also working with the largest distributor. It's you can think of it as being kind of like a Sam's Club, but it's a buying collective for the small merchants. There's about 1 million, 2 small merchants in Mexico that buy from these distributors, and so we work with them as well to be able to provide the supply chain and the payment system that helps to facilitate that supply chain. In the restaurant space, there's some initiatives to move cash into electronic. We're working with the largest provider of that. In the transportation area, we're working also with the largest distributor of petroleum, the largest gas station chain, in order to be able to serve the taxi and buses and that portion of the industry. In the vending space, we're working with the largest bottler in Mexico, and they're a distributor of snack foods as well. In general, the unattended space, if you go to Net Clearance System, you'll see the technical partnership that we've established. They have a little module, that module right there that you probably have seen if you've been in the display area. That's for proximity-based marketing. It's also for an alternative to an EMV-based or an NFC-based contactless payment system. We don't do EMV, we don't do traditional NFC, but it's a Bluetooth-based module that provides, at one hand, a contactless payment method, and on the other hand, a proximity marketing method. And then finally, something that is impossible if you're in a cash-based economy is being able to buy things online. Mexico is the largest user of internet data in all of Latin America, and in fact, they actually use the internet slightly more than the average American. I didn't know that. That's amazing to me. However, only 10% of the households have internet access in the form of broadband and with computers like we do. So how is it that Mexico can be such a huge consumer of internet data? The answer is they love their smartphones. Everything they do online is through a smartphone. 52% of the people I told you is they have a smartphone of some type, mostly Android phones, and they use it. Here's the problem. You're going to Amazon, you're going to eBay, you're going to all of these retailers, and you see the things you want to buy. You have a little discretionary income, you want to buy it, right? You can't. You're 100% in cash. You can't stick coins and bills inside of your phone and expect that that's going to work. Unipagos provides that technology bridge that allows that to happen. So, I told you we have a social mission, and so we think a lot about the people that we serve, this disenfranchised portion of the population, the bottom of the economic pyramid. By the way, by the bottom, I mean the bottom 75% of the economic pyramid. That's a lot of people. We take for granted these fundamental capabilities, but they don't. We think about their problems and their fundamental problems and that they face on a daily basis, and our goal is to help solve those problems. So let's take Julio, for example. He's a migrant worker, very common. About 10%, 12% of the Mexican population are migrant workers. He's the head of the household. There's a lot of Mexican machismo. He wants to continue to be able to be the head of the household, manage the money, pay the bills, even when he's traveling. He also wants to be able to send money back to his wife for the incidental day-to-day things. His wife, Patty, needs to receive money as well while he's away from home. What does he do? Well, we provide that capability. Unipagos also works inside of the United States, which is why I'm here. You can pay your bills. You can, with just a couple of swipes of your finger, you can get an electronic receipt. A bill payment is done in seconds. Now, I'm going to back up just a couple of slides. I want to show you that the approach we've taken is very skeuomorphic. In the United States, we've all decided that flat design is the way to go, right? Get rid of all of these fancy bells and whistles. But there was a reason for skeuomorphism, and that reason applies in Mexico. These people are used to handling cash. And so what we built into the application is a cash-based paradigm. They actually manipulate cash in much the same way that they manipulate cash in the physical world. And that's intended to be able to provide a semantic bridge, if you will, between the cash-based world that they're in and the digital world that we're trying to help them to get to. And as a result, the acceptance and training cycles are much shorter. So let's go to another individual. This is Alfonso. Alfonso is a small operator of a small convenience store. They call them tiendas or tienditas in Mexico. He's got a business problem. His business is getting eroded by the national chains, the Mexican brands, OXXO, Extra, and also American brands, Circle K, 7-Eleven. These are all over Mexico now. They provide the same products on the shelf as Alfonso, but they also provide digital services. And he's finding that his customers, when they need to pay the bills, they're going up the street to the OXXO instead of coming to his store, which is where they have normally been. Now, Mexicans would prefer to shop at these small traditional stores. It's what they've always known, and they're very traditional in that regard. But they don't have a choice. They have to pay their bills. So they're going up the street to a national brand and getting a sterile, non-Mexican experience. Alfonso needs to compete. So Unipagos provides the ability for him to offer those digital goods and services that today are only being provided by the national chains. Now he can compete, he can keep the spend in his store. That solves a critical business problem for him. For him, he just has to either through a proximity-based method like the module I showed you, or using a mobile phone number, the mobile phone number of the consumer, he can send a request for payment, and with a single swipe, the consumer can make that payment. Very convenient, very fast. Rosa's a different problem. She's a shut-in. She stays at home, elderly lady. She needs to be able to pay for the medicines that get delivered to her house. But she doesn't have a bank account, she doesn't have a car, and so that presents a problem for her. For her, she can just pay the pharmacy and they can deliver the goods without her having to get out of her chair. And then finally, there's a whole, I guess you would call them millennials in Mexico, although they don't use that term. These are young, tech-savvy people, and they're trying to make it into the digital economy. They use WhatsApp, they use Facebook. They can see the future just the same way millennials see it in the United States. Here, she has a website. The problem is, how does she sell her goods online? Well, Unipagos provides that capability as well. A two-screen experience or a one-screen experience. Two screens if you have a computer and you're using the full browser-based approach. Your payment happens on the mobile phone. If you're a mobile application vendor and you need to incorporate payment, then you can do app-to-app integration as well. And so that provides a rich set of APIs that allow this millennial group, this new e-commerce group, to be able to implement solutions in Mexico. So these are the people that we serve. These are examples of the people we serve in Mexico. The rails that we provide solve critical business problems for them. Those core problems are all available using the Unipagos platform. We're the first of our kind to be able to do this, and the solution is something that is designed to work with any developing economy, of which there's 130-something around the world. So we're excited about what we're doing. We're forging new territory, and we're learning a lot in the process. The learnings continue, and that's pretty much all I wanted to say today. I hope you found that's interesting. This is very different, probably, than the kinds of things that you would normally see. One last thought. How is this relevant to the people in this room? Well, there's a couple of reasons it's relevant to the people in this room. One is there's now, if you'd asked me about 3 years ago what the percentage of unbanked is in the United States, I would have told you 93%, and it's always been 93%. Ask me today, it's 89% of the people have bank accounts. 11% do not have bank accounts. It's growing. Why is that? It's immigrants that they prefer not to enter the formal economy and use traditional banking accounts. It's also millennials. We know this. Millennials are looking for alternative ways to do things. This is the growing segment of the population. And so even though you might think it's a small problem today, 11% is a big number. And because it's growing, it's something we should all pay attention to. There's going to be a segment of this population, or perhaps a large segment of the population, that you cannot reach with EMV cards and terminals and things like that. This is something that can be helpful as well in the United States. It's something that can be helpful around the world. My dream is that people in any country in the world can get on a plane, fly to any other country in the world, and know that they can feed themselves and house themselves and get back home. And they don't have to think about bank accounts and whether they have a Visa card or a MasterCard in their pocket. They just get on the plane and go. That's, I think that typifies what we'd all like to see, which is a completely unified worldwide economy. It's the vision that you can see with a Bitcoin. It's also the vision that you could see with Unipagos as well. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.